Welcome to Discover Marshalltown. I'm your host, Denny Gravenbauer. As we discover things about our Marshalltown area in and around the community, it's always fun to bring somebody in here that's got some knowledge of what's going on in and around our community. My guest in today's show is Jay Carollo. Jay, welcome to Discover Marshalltown.
Thanks, Denny. It's a pleasure to be here again.
So I just want to get things off, and is it the right thing to say and ask, what is new in genealogy?
In 5 years, there are many, many more records that have been digitized. Ancestry.com is the world's leader in digitizing records, along with Family Search. There's Heritage, My Heritage and Heritage Quest, and there's also Fold3, which has become the premier repository for digitized military records. And I have some relatives in New York that served in the Civil War, and I can go back and actually look at their enlistment, their discharge, where they served, and these are copied right from the National Archives. So I mean, there's just more and more out there. And
where's it coming from? I mean,
it's coming from courthouses, it's coming from repositories, it's coming from records that have been stored away for years and years, and people are wanting these. And like my Ancestry.com subscription costs me about $50 a month. Well, when we talked 5 years ago, I think it was costing $15 a month. So the more they add, the more they can charge you. And I'm not being critical of that. I'm just saying it's better information. It's again, more digitized information. When I can sit at home and print out a copy of my great-great-great-grandfather's Civil War enlistment papers, and it looks like something that was printed today, of course it is, that adds to the value of your genealogy. The two shows, Who Do You Think You Are, that's on TLC, and the one that has Henry Louis Gates, Where Do You Think You Came From? I'm sorry, I'm not telling you the right title, but it's on PBS. They're one of the top-rated genealogy shows, and there's just more and more people interested. And 25 years ago, genealogists were doing things by going to those paper records, looking them up, writing them down, creating a notebook, creating a card file, and it's just become, everyone has a computer, everyone has a laptop or a handheld. Like look at yourself with the iPhone.
But how do you trust the authenticity? You know, you send away. I'm not sure how you.
Well, say I send to the state of New York and get my grandfather's birth certificate. It is signed by the hospital, it's signed by the doctor, it's notarized or has got an official stamp on it from the county where he was born, and they will send you an actual, and I call it a photostat. They're far from photostats now, they're digital copies, and then they also certify that copy. And the other thing is, with a family Bible, with the census reports, school reports, military service, even on my paternal side, where my grandfather came from Palermo, Sicily. I have pictures of the boat. I have the name of the boat, the day it left Palermo, the day it got to New York, and it shows him on. I think he had $22 with him when he came to America.
Record that?
They recorded that because I don't know what would have happened if he had only had $2 or only had 20 cents. I don't know if you get shuffled over to another line, but when he
was that deemed as wealthy to come
$23 in 1903 was a lot of money. Yeah,
I take $23 in this year.
Well, at the age of 25, when he came here, he had already been married for 10 years. He got married when he was 15. He worked here he came in 1900, went back in 1903 to get his wife, and then brought her back, and you know, you stop and think, that's a long time to save your money to leave all your relatives, all your native family, and then come to America.
Sure.
And I just, you know, gives me goosebumps just to think about it.
It's neat. I know our friend of ours their family had a hard-covered book that was actually passed down from way far back as the late 1700s. And, you know, for a family to all of a sudden have that, you know, and that, again, it's passed down generation and generation and generation. And to really be able to look back and trace all about your family's history. But the question I'm sure you get asked a lot, you know, you said you worked 17 years on getting the information for your own family.
And I'm only back to Civil War.
I can go on TV and they can find somebody's upbringing on the hour show. Now, how does that happen?
It happens with millions of dollars worth of staff and researchers, and I'll be real honest with you. When you go up to, just for example, the Marshall County Courthouse, the people up there are gracious and helpful, but they're not going to hold it out to you on a card and say, look what we found, and we've translated it for you and printed it all out for you. You research it, you take your pictures or pay them for a copy, you organize it, and you know, the genealogical shows that are on TV are entertainment. They're a hook to get you interested. And if you look, most of them are sponsored either by Family Search or Ancestry.com. And what they want to do is get you interested. And then when you go to Ancestry.com, you're going to say, wait a minute, I can only get so far. Well, yes, you can get further.
Then you pay another $50 and you get a little further.
Yeah.
I say, okay.
And the thing is they have you, they're playing you, and I'm not being derogatory. They're playing you like a little bit like a fish, because they're going, well, we'll let them have the 1880 and the 1940 census, but if you want the information in between or before, you're going to have to pay us. Sure. And of course, why not? I want to know what happened to Grandpa. I want to know what happened to Aunt Bessie, you know. And I do a lot of it for different people. I'm always glad to help somebody and get them started. The thing I tell people is talk to your own family first. See what records your aunts, uncles, grandparents. See what records are out there. I'm going to do a program this Sunday at the genealogy meeting, and it's on city directories. City directories provide a lot of information. We'll be doing one on telephone directories. Telephone directories, and if you go back and look at a telephone directory from 1950, they have a thick yellow page section. They have everybody back then that had a phone was listed. I mean, it wasn't like cell phones now where everyone's carrying a cell phone. No one knows.
Sure. Nobody can trace or find my number if they want to call.
No one can trace your number. And,
but still everybody calls and you're on the phone all the time.
Well, yeah. But the thing is we like to get information about people, and through these old telephone books, old city directories, old school yearbooks, you can find out alumni directories. It just makes it, again, you have to be a bit of a detective. You start to find a little pattern in the best way to find your family or your relatives, or again, and my ego's going to get in the way here in a minute, but I'm going to say I just happen to have a knack, because back in the 7th grade I got hooked on Marshalltown history, and when kids were reading comic books and Hardy Boys and Nancy Drews, I was reading phone books, city directories, and encyclopedias. So
when you put on one of them symposiums and people come in and they listen to you, what's the most frequently asked question?
How do I get started? Where can I find Aunt Bess or Uncle Tony? And how can I find them back in England, as today, right. Ireland, how can I find, and people that came from Ireland, in the late 1800s were generally very poor people. They might not be super educated, and the people at Ellis Island or Castle Garden, which preceded Ellis Island, might not have been the brightest bulbs in the tree. So your name, I can just imagine what they have done to Grabenbauer. Yeah, or Carollo. Look at my name. You know how we've seen my name spelled with C-A-R-C-O-R, C-O-R-R, C-O-R-I. I mean, it's again, it's one of those things you just have to have an open mind, and there's also ways as you get experienced on how to search with a system called SoundX, which takes the first 3 letters and then a question mark and an asterisk, and you can search a little deeper. They have a thing called the Social Security Death Index, which comes from people who are registered with Social Security. When you expire, the funeral home passes that information to the Social Security Department, and of course they have a file of, like if I tried to use my father's Social Security number and he's been gone 33 years, someone would say, oh, wait a minute, that's not a good Social Security number. But yet they have information on when he was born, where he was born, where he applied for Social Security, and when he died, and where he died. So, I mean, it's an index that the government does provide. And
so that information is out there.
That information is out there. It is at Marshalltown Public Library. You can get information like that up at the Historical Society of Marshall County, up at the Genealogy Library up there. You can get it up at the courthouse. You can get it in Des Moines at the Iowa Genealogical Society Library, which is right down next to the State Historical Museum. There's a repository in Kansas City. There's a real good one in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and of course Salt Lake City. I mean, best thing I ever did was for like $30, subscribe to a magazine called Family Tree Magazine. It comes out every other month, and it's one of those you read from cover to cover because it gives you links, it gives you ideas, and it might show you in genealogy, if I'm trying to look into the Grabenbauer family and I can't find any, I get stopped. We call it a brick wall. Well, it shows you how to overcome a brick wall or smash through a brick wall, as we say, and help you find your relatives. And again, it might be a thing as simply as the G might look like a Q, or it might be instead of GR, GN. I mean, you know, it's just one of those things you just find as you get used to it. And I also transcribe records for the Italian Genealogy Society out in New York, and they are digitizing all of the municipal archives in New York City. Well, they have volunteers that go there that photograph those records. They send copies of the photographs to the volunteers out all across the United States, and then we put them into an Excel form or Access form, and now it's online. So like my relatives that are in New York City, I've been able to come up with birth, death, marriage, work, where they worked. I mean, it's fantastic.
Well, I tell you what, you know, I was kind of nicknamed the Super Snoop, but it takes somebody that wants to get in that and dwell into that to really find out what is going on. But now, you know, I want to shift gears here just a little bit, because not only are you interested and do a lot of genealogy work, but you also are now the editor of in the Times Republican, The Pastimes. And you know, you said when you were 17 years old, you started looking at this, but a lot of people don't realize you were born in Brewster, New York, or lived in New York out east. You came to Marshalltown at an early age, and all of a sudden now you are one of maybe the top 10 of the most knowledgeable individuals in Marshalltown for Marshalltown history. How in the world did that happen?
I was in the 8th grade. I was required to do a project on local government. And back then we had to do at least, I think it was 3 pages. And I really got into it. I went up to City Hall, and it happened to be when City Hall used to be open on Saturdays, and Mayor Bill Crosby was up there. The clerk was Rena Van Orman. Wayne Beasley was the police chief. And the 3 of them took me and gave me the City Hall tour. I can't remember I want to say Helen Hurlbut might have been the librarian, but they gave me more than the 25-cent tour and just got me hooked on Marshalltown. It's all of its pros, all of the available history. And of course I went over to the fire station, and Leonard Lepore and his crew taught me about the fire department. And I stayed interested. It was one of those things that kids collect stamps or they shoot marbles. I stuck with the Marshalltown history, and I've fallen in love with it. And out of the 5 families that moved here in September of 1963, I'm the only person still here 53 years later. So, I mean, evidently it must have worked well with me. Now with Facebook, I've connected with some of my friends that are still out in New York and relatives, but I still call this as my hometown.
You know, I know a lot of times I'll see, you know, somebody will say, well, they saw a post that you put on there of the old Osco drugstore, Gillum's Jewelry, you know, and just different landmarks that us I mean, I've been here all my life, but you forget about some of that stuff. And it's almost kind of neat to see it again, the Kim's Drive-In, the King's Food Host, you know.
Well, yeah, we had a lady last month or 2 months ago asked about King's and their cheese Frenchie sandwiches, which was their grilled cheese. It was batter dipped and deep fried. And you know, one of the things I frequently get asked, and it's something I'll probably collaborate with you on when I get ready to write it, is stories on the old grocery stores. Because we used to have a grocery store every 3 or 4 blocks. And then we also had a big grocery store, what we called a big grocery store, not a supermart, but a great big self-serve grocery store. And Marshalltown had their fair share of those. Gas stations, car dealers, hardware stores. Jerry Harms I was talking to the other morning, lumber yards. Marshalltown used to have half a dozen lumber yards. And I'm not saying anything bad about Marshalltown. We're a wonderful, progressive community, but times have changed. The way we do business has changed. And it's nice to walk back or take a stroll back and through pictures, through stories. I'm real fortunate to have a lot of followers, and quite a few of them write to me, either by email or the people that don't do computer will write me a letter and either send me some information or call me. And I'm trying to include all of Marshall County, not just Marshalltown, but each one of those little towns has a story behind them too. There's something interesting there. And when you get to talking to people, they start telling you about different people that are related. They tell you about people that were famous at one time. You know, they were a state legislator, or they were the county supervisor, or they were the sheriff. And you know, we don't realize how far we've come over the years. And sometimes we take so much for granted that it really makes me think when I go back and write those stories.
You know, you talk about the grocery stores on every quadrant, you know, in the areas. Back then, you had 1 car per family. You know, all 4 boys didn't have a car. You know, we had a bicycle that if the tires were pumped up, you could ride it somewhere. But you'd run down to the grocery store, and I used to remember back in my early days in the bread business, the old grocer would take out his cardboard box of different pads, and you'd walk in and grab some milk, and just put it on the pad, you know. And that's how they did business. They didn't have the computer, the scanners, anything like that.
No. Up at the Historical Museum at 202 East Church Street, they have a grocery store filing system that was used years ago, and it has spots from A to Z and 1 through 10, I believe, and places to put the bill in. And then every week, I would suspect, I can't imagine a grocer letting someone go much longer than a week. But then again, we have to remember, milk was a nickel a quart and bread was a nickel a loaf. So. You know, and I have a large collection of Marshalltown memorabilia that includes a lot of grocery ads, a lot of car ads, sporting goods, realty ads, and it's fun to take a trip. I think maybe sometime if you invite me back, I'll bring some cards that we can hold up and show people that would.
Well, it only took 6 years to bring you back from the last time. But then, okay, now you're talking about Marshalltown history, and you're involved in writing the pastime articles. I mean, when you start writing, or when you start reading those articles that you write, it's just continuous. There's so much knowledge there of the past.
The other thing I've tried to do is, and I brought back an idea that Paul Norris had years ago, and Mel Pitson did it for a while too. It's called local comment, which honors those who have passed on, but yet it's something I remember about them, or they made a note or a mark in the Marshalltown area, Marshall County area, that you want people, you know, to give them that one last remembrance. And also I try to include, people ask me, you know, I rarely have to work to find a subject, because people ask me, like, for example, that little restaurant that used to be on South 3rd Avenue in front of what was the 7-Up plant, which is now the car wash, and that little 6-stool or 4-stool and 1-booth restaurant people started asking me about. I had a man driving through from Texas.
What was the name of it?
It was called the We Dug In.
We Dug In.
We Dug In. And they operated it on with a hot plate. And but I can imagine yourself being, you know, formerly as a bread salesman, you guys probably took them maybe 1 or 2 loaves, but yet it was a constant sale. And there was a lot of, and when I was looking into that area, the levee has a whole story in itself with the original railroad YMCA. Because if you dig down deep enough at one of those empty lots down by the old Midwest Machine and Welding, there's a marble swimming pool. There's the old hotel, the Northwestern Hotel, that was used for people coming off the trains. After they ate at Stone's, they came up and stayed at that hotel rather than walk clear up to the Pilgrim.
I remember seeing a photo that my uncle ran with a horse-drawn wagon, delivered bread out of a bakery that was located down there. Soukup's Bakery.
Yep, Soukup's Bakery. And then you also had a relative that was a milkman in a milk wagon. And somewhere I've seen a picture of that. So I mean, you know, the more you talk, the more people remember. Which is good, because it brings out this stuff that's been stored away in a closet.
And you know, the sad part about it is I've got photos of my parents and their relation, and after my generation's gone, I'm not sure what'll happen to those photos.
Well,
but nowadays, who wants to see those? You know, the grandkids don't want to see them. You know, they drool on them, and the way that you know they're done with them. But, you know, what do we do with them? What should people do with that stuff?
Turn them over to the genealogical or the historical society. And if they have no one in their family that wants them, and you can still identify them, even if you can't, there's half a dozen of us in our genealogical society that instead of playing cards, we'll sit around for 6 hours and backtrack a person, or backtrack some information, whether it be the photo studio and what the people were wearing, or if they were, you know, if it's a shot that was taken downtown, you look and see what the store was, and then track the store, and you can kind of get a range of when it is, and then you start, something all of a sudden clicks, and you figure out who it is. I have friends in Des Moines that went to one of those thrift stores down there and bought a marriage license for a couple in Marshalltown. They brought it up to me and they says, here, you probably want to get this back to these people. So I spent a Saturday with a friend of mine. We went through and we figured out who they were. They were married out of that church. It used to be just east of Hardee's on Anson Street. It was an old stucco church that burned. And we figured out who they were, and we figured out who their relatives in Marshalltown were. And my friend said she'd take it to them, and I thought, let's pray that these people didn't say, well, that's the certificate we gave to Goodwill, you know. But it was framed nice, and they were tickled to get it. But, you know, you can't charge them anything for it, but it took a good 6 or 8 hours to.
All right, just kind of in closing, what's the next big article we're going to look forward to seeing in past times? And this show will be kind of showed at different times.
I would say it'd probably be the grocery store article.
That'd be good.
I think it'll be because I've had people that parents worked in the grocery business, or their mothers were cashiers, or their aunts and uncles ran a grocery store. And again, it's one of those things that it's just going to probably have to be a series because there were so many. There were I got sheets that showed like there was 40 of them at one time.
Well, I tell you what, thanks for coming back 6 years later, and thanks for kind of bringing us up to date on a little bit of the genealogy and the past times. As we look forward, we always have to look behind to see what's behind us in the past times, correct?
That's right.
We want to thank our studio audience for showing up today and being out here with us, and we want to thank you for tuning us in. And if you're interested in, give me your address. If people have got some information they should give you, how do they get a hold of you?
Best way to get hold of me is either on my cell phone, 751-7924, or they can send my address is 1010 Summit Street here in Marshalltown.
All right. Thanks for tuning us in. I'm Denny Grabenbauer, your host, and you've been on Discover Marshalltown.